Caroline Leavitt putting the entire media establishment on notice. Donald Trump has just taken a wrecking ball to ABC, CBS, NBC, the New York Times, you name it. Establishment, legacy media is done. Podcasting, streaming, individual creators and influencers, they are all in. Watch.
And in keeping with this revolutionary media approach that President Trump deployed during the campaign, the Trump White House will speak to all media outlets and personalities, not just the legacy media who are seated in this room. Because according to recent polling from Gallup, Americans' trust in mass media has fallen to a record low. Millions of Americans, especially young people, have turned from traditional television outlets and newspapers to consume their news from podcasts, blogs, social media, and other independent outlets. It's essential to our team that we share President Trump's message everywhere and adapt this White House to the new media landscape in 2025. To do this, I am excited to announce the following changes will be made to this historic James S. Brady briefing room, where Mr. Brady's legacy will endure. This White House believes strongly in the First Amendment, so it's why our team will work diligently to restore the press passes of the 440 journalists whose passes were wrongly revoked by the previous administration. We're also opening up this briefing room to new media voices who produce news-related content and whose outlet is not already represented by one of the seats in this room. We welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House. And you can apply now on our new website, whitehouse.gov/new media. Starting today, this seat in the front of the room, which is usually occupied by the press secretary's staff, will be called the new media seat. My team will review the applications and give credentials to new media applicants who meet our criteria and pass United States Secret Service requirements to enter the White House complex. So in light of these announcements, our first questions for today's briefing will go to these new media members whose outlets, despite being some of the most viewed news websites in the country, have not been given seats in this room.
It's amazing. Okay, let me just tell you how revolutionary this is. As somebody who spent, 20 years in the mainstream media, part of legacy media. In fact, I worked at CBS and at NBC News. I was a commentator on ABC News. I worked at Bloomberg. I've been there, done that. Fox too, okay? So let me just tell you, this is a big deal. Because it used to be you needed to work for a network in order to have a platform, right? Those days are gone, right? I'm here, you're here, we're all here, happy together. And this is not anything other than the Trish Regan channel, the Trish Regan show on the Trish Regan channel. So I don't have to go through the legacy media in order to reach you. This is totally brand new. And this is just something that obviously has been happening in the last few years. But you combine that together with now the White House saying, we welcome all of you. And we know they do because they've been certainly good about giving access. They didn't really have the kind of access you might want to the legacy media, to be perfectly honest, or maybe they had access, but they were going to have their sound bites reinterpreted for them in ways that were not so pleasant. Unlike Kamala Harris, who, by the way, got the royal treatment by CBS News to the point where Donald Trump's suing them for $10 billion because they would edit and re-edit things to make her seem great. Look, he's had it. He knows what that's about. So here he is inviting these very big players into the room, such as, Deadline reported on this, but I want to say Daily Wire, which gets tons. You know Ben Shapiro, right? I mean, he's got 7 million followers. We're teeny compared to Ben, by the way. Thank you for subscribing, sharing, liking. Smash those likes, as Don would tell you. Anyway, Ben's got 7 million followers on YouTube, and the website is a behemoth, and yet they couldn't get access to the White House briefing room. Apparently, that was just too special. They weren't allowed to ask questions. No, not at the White House briefing room or Post Millennial, which is a hugely popular site as well. Look at the reporters psyched. Oh my God, we're here. We're in the White House briefing room. This is unbelievable. And so I actually went to this website. You can apply for credentials, and that means, you then have access. They used to restrict this. I mean, it's really, really, really restricted, and they have some special front row, and only certain people get to sit in the front row. And then there's this whole jockeying for seats. They have the White House Correspondents Association, which you have to be part of, and so on and so on and so on. So this is revolutionary. He has just shaken things up in ways that, well, I guess we could anticipate, and perhaps even the mainstream media anticipated. Perhaps this is what scared the living daylights out of them. This is why they didn't want him to win. They kept saying, no, it can't happen, it can't happen, it can't happen. That basically he would be disastrous for society. I mean, they made some really, as you know, very, very bad comparisons to some of the biggest villains, if you would, in history. And I was like, why are they so out over their skis? I mean, I get it. They got nothing in the way of policy as far as Kamala or Joe are considered. There was nothing to run on. You didn't have personality. You didn't have an economy. You didn't have a safe country vis-a-vis the border, et cetera. You didn't have a quiet international situation. And you certainly didn't have the joy that she was going on and on and on about. So what did you run on? Oh, you ran on the other guy is bad. He's so bad that the world is going to end if you elect him. I mean, literally, that's what they were saying. The world was going to effectively end, as you know it, if you elected him. And what did people do? They elected him anyway. And so now he's getting a little bit of revenge. I wouldn't even call it revenge. You know what? It's just fairness. It's just transparency. This is the right thing to do. Podcasters, streamers, influencers should all have the ability to ask questions of the President of the United States and of the White House. They shouldn't be shut out like they got some kind of special problem. It's really, really remarkable to see. It's refreshing. It's where we're going, right? In society. This is what I talk about all the time. The transparency that you have, that we're here together. You can ask me questions in the live chat, and this is just going to get better and better and better. And I can respond to them. I don't have a script. I don't have to go through management saying, okay, Trish, you can say this and you can't say that. But by the way, you can say this, but we're going to fire you for it anyway, right? I'm thinking about March 2020 and a certain broadcaster I used to work for. All fine, right? Because the reality is, in some ways, I wish it had happened earlier, because the world has changed. The world has changed, and I now have the ability to speak directly to you. I have the ability to speak directly to the White House. I have the ability to speak to all of the players, quote unquote, in charge, right? All the important people. You don't have to work for a network anymore. And this is miraculous, but it also means that there's going to be much, much more change to come. And this is why when I talk about the networks really going down the tubes, and Brandon Carr over at the FCC making some changes, he has said, for example, in a letter to Bob Iger over at ABC, right? Disney owns ABC. Bob is the CEO of Disney. Brendan's like, no one has any faith in you guys. Nobody trusts you guys. And that means maybe we're not going to allow for these affiliates to be renewing their affiliations with you, ABC. See, it's a misnomer to think that all of those stations all across the country, or local stations, are controlled by ABC. They're not. ABC News and Disney only own about 7 of them. They had 7 O&Os the last time I checked, one of which I remember was in San Francisco. I know that because I worked for the CBS O&O there in San Francisco, right across the street. So they have these owned and operated stations, but everything else, somebody pays a licensing fee to ABC to be able to use their brand. But in order to do that, it means they have to come over the public airwaves, and that is something that the FCC has control over. So there's a lot of stuff that's changing, and it's all happening in real time. And you know what? It's exciting. All right? We're here together as this whole thing gets smashed in a good way that allows us to understand and know the truth. So I'm happy you're here. I hope you subscribe. Quick shout out for one of our sponsors. We have so much to get to today, including this Captain America stuff. Gold, right? Gold, I actually bought some more yesterday. It went up today. I try and buy it whenever it goes down on a little bit of a dip, because this is effectively my insurance in my own portfolio. It's an insurance against inflation. It's insurance against Armageddon. And hey, who doesn't need a little bit of insurance? It seems that the rest of the world feels that way too, because you've seen a lot of upside in gold, up some 30% 20% and change just over the course of the last year. And then, of course, we're continuing to see this upside. A lot of people thinking it's going to $3,000 an ounce. I guess I hope so, and yet I don't hope so, right? Because at the same time, you're like, wait a second, if it's going there, we might have some bad things going on. I like gold because it helps me to sleep at night. In other words, I feel better about my portfolio and my diversification strategy, knowing that I have something like gold, and there's different ways to do this. This is certainly one of the ones I like the most to afford for that diversification and allow you the ability to sleep well at night. You can get up to $15,000 right now in free silver with this special offer from American Heart for Gold if you go to trishlovesgold.com. You can't forget that, right? trishlovesgold.com. You can text Trish to 65532 today. Again, text Trish to 65532 today.